What is going on, YouTube people? New Cards and Comics here for a tradition unlike any other. It is time to look back at how a decent chunk of football cards performed throughout the 2024 season. We are running the world famous charts and graphs back to early August. We're going back 180 days. That takes us to early August, right in the early days of training camp, and seeing how some of the top players performed price-wise. Typically speaking, this video is a bloodbath and has been a bloodbath in many years past. There is a little bit of an outlier this year, and though it's not spectacular, it does feel a little bit better. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying it's not as bad as it has been in previous years. So, with that being said, if you want to check out Market Movers, a link in the description down below. You could get 2 weeks free and 20% off for life if you want your own charts and graphs. All right, for the purposes of this video, we are looking at PSA 10s. For the most part, we are looking at Prism Silvers. The exception to the rule is for the 2018 draft class. We are looking at Optic Hollows. 2018 Silver Prisms are ghosts. They are near impossible to hit, and the pop counts are super low. They do not transact enough to use them. Are Silver Prisms and Optic Hollows perfect? No, but it does give us a good general overall idea how that player's cards moved at a macro level over the course of the 2024 season. The reason why we use these are the population count is low enough that it's not a base. It's also high enough that it transacts often enough, which is important for an exercise like this. And they are very liquid, popular cards. I'm not saying they're the best investments in the world or anything like that, but they are popular, and that matters. They are liquid and they transact frequently, which helps for exercises like this. Let's start with the 2018 class, the Optic Hollow class, if you will. 2018 is the outlier all around. It absolutely crushed. 2018 was the big winner from this season from top to bottom. We're also going to glance at sealed wax really quickly. 2018 performed very well there as well. At the top, seeing the biggest dollar value change, that's how I have this sorted. Josh Allen, $455 up. That's a 60% increase. Obviously had an amazing season. Lamar Jackson also had an amazing year, only up $200 and only up 30%. So that one was a little surprising. Next up, Saquon Barkley. That's right, a position player. Up $200, 177%. Two other surprising ones, and I honestly thought these players would be up a little bit more. Maybe people just were waiting to see it in the playoffs. Sam Darnold only up $50. That's a 55% jump, basically. And Baker Mayfield, my boy, up $42-ish. Also about a 50 to 55% jump up for him. Just surprised those numbers aren't more. Baker and Sam Darnold both had insane years, and their stuff was pretty cheap to begin with to get into. So you would think it wouldn't take as much for that market to move, but they only went up 50% on their Optic Hollows. Still very affordable compared to some of the guys out there. To me, the biggest surprise, not that he didn't have an amazing year, guy almost broke the rushing record, just to see Saquon jump that much. Usually a lot of hype or a lot of money doesn't usually flow to non-quarterbacks. That being said, that could be a little bit risky given the injury history of our Bs. Finishing off the rest of the class here, DJ Moore and Calvin Ridley down slightly. Now, let's go over to the main event. Let's look at Prisms. I looked at 2016 through 2024 and omitted 2018. Now, 2024, there won't really be anything yet, but I included it just in case. And I sorted this once again by dollar value change. The winner in the clubhouse is Patrick Mahomes. Now, it's only a 26% increase, but it's 1.2K in value because his prices are so high to begin with. Last sale there, just under $6,000. We'll see what happens when we get into the playoffs with him. The Chiefs have been a hot button issue this year just because they've won a ton, but they haven't really looked great doing it. But that being said, they are about as full strength as they have been for pretty much all year. Getting Hollywood Brown back, Pacheco back, getting Travis Kelce a couple of weeks off. We'll see how they do once the playoffs really start for them, but we got to wait an extra week for that. It'll be interesting to see what his prices do if they get bounced early or if they make a run. There's so much money into the Mahomes market. Now, what you notice here versus the 2018 class, look at how much of a drop there is on the going up values. Now, obviously, Mahomes is Mahomes, but then the number one player in the clubhouse of the non-Mahomes is Jared Goff. It's only up $110. Now, that's a 60% swing. And once again, I'm almost kind of surprised this card is not up more. Goff had an amazing year. The Lions look poised to make a deep run, even with their busted up defense. And he's only up about $100. We have Justin Jefferson now in fourth place. That's two position players in a row, up only 20%. He had a pretty good year. That's a $70 increase. Let's keep scrolling down here a little bit. Jameson Williams up a little bit. Kareem Hunt. But what do you notice? We're already in the teens. We're $15 up. Cooper Kupp up $15. This one was a little bit surprising to me. Jamar Chase only basically staying flat. A 6% increase to $180. Guy had an insane season. And he is barely up at all. I'm curious to see what his overall chart looks like during that. But yeah, even dipped lower in season and then kind of rallied back here just recently. If it wasn't for the last couple of weeks, he'd be down even more. He'd actually be down quite a bit, which is just stunning when you think about the year that he had. And then we're basically even, if something's only going up $4 or $5, like, what are we really doing here? So not great overall. Your biggest winner of the quarterbacks outside of Mahomes and, up 26%. I don't know that I would classify that as a big winner. Is Jared Goff. 60% increase is really nice. I would kind of expect more given the season that he had. Just kind of keep this in mind, looking, Jaden Daniels silver PSA 10s are going to hit the market pretty soon here. Compare that to what the Goff goes for and look at the career that Goff has had and the season that Goff has had, and he's only $300. That should be a warning sign for you across the board when you're spending big money on these quarterbacks. But none of the other quarterbacks popped off outside of the 2018 guys. Like I said, they're kind of the outlier in all this. Now, cover your eyes. We're going to flip this chart around and go the other direction. And now things get ugly. Like I said, it wasn't as bad, but it's not great either. Trevor Lawrence down 70%, a $750 drop from August. Now, next on the list is Joe Burrow. I will say a couple have sold just recently in the $1,600 range, $1,500 range. So he's not quite down $750. He's more down like $300. So that looks a little bit better as he closed out the season pretty strong. Now, they didn't end up making the playoffs, so we'll see if that dips again or not. But that one is, I'll put a little asterisk next to that one. CJ Stroud, one of the bigger disasters of the season, down 60%, a $500 and some drop. I remember selling one of these to Brian Gray at the National in Cleveland for like $850 and being thrilled to move off that card. Now, he was buying for a repacker. It was immediately moved. It's not like he lost any money on it, but just wild to think how the perception of Stroud has changed just since the National. Next up, Anthony Richardson down 80%. $380 drop. Basically proved to the world that he is probably not a real NFL quarterback. Kyler Murray down 70%. He had a very up and down season. Brock Purdy, 49ers were cursed all year, down $300. That's a 40% drop. Scroll down here. Tua obviously had the concussion issues this year, down 60%. Jordan Love down 25%. Gardner Minshew of all people. Jalen Hurts down 30%. I believe he is still in concussion protocol for this week's Eagles game. Depending on when you're watching this, that could have already changed. Hurts gets no Hobby Love, even when they were going to the Super Bowl. Trey Lance down 83% as people were specking on him before the season started. Will Levis down 80%. He had a disaster of a year. Christian McCaffrey obviously had major injury concerns. Tyreek Hill had a disaster of the year. Justin Herbert had a slow start and then kind of picked things up as the season went along, and that's kind of reflected here. He's down $100, but it's only a 10% change as he's a $1,000 card in a PSA 10 silver. So he didn't get absolutely decimated. Bijan Robinson had a good fantasy season, but he's on the Falcons and nobody cares about running backs outside of Saquon Barkley. Dak Prescott had a disaster of the year. Do we have to talk about him? Deshaun Watson massaged his way down 82%. His Silver Prism PSA 10 currently sells for $20. Specifically $19.50, and that's about $19 too much. Garrett Wilson down 50%. His stuff got a big run up in the offseason because of the Aaron Rodgers hype train. Bryce Young, this is one I specifically wanted to call out. Down $75, down 35%. Had a whirlwind of a season and actually finished really strong. He looked pretty decent the last few weeks. We'll see what that means for the Panthers going forward, but his stuff did, if we pull up the full look at the chart, it did the same thing. It started very high, it dipped very low, and then it kind of rallied here in the last month or so of the season from when he got benched in the middle. And then, continuing on the list, you can see how deep this list is. I'm 40 cards deep, and we are still at negative $35. When I flipped this around and you looked at the cards going up, when I got to 40 deep, I was already in the red and completely out of the green. So way, 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 way more cards going down than what went up for the course of the season. Now, we still have the playoffs to go. That could totally swing a lot of things. And I honestly don't know how many people these days are buying these cards before the season starts and hoping that they go up based off player performance. I guess maybe it's still a lot. The purpose of this video and the reason why I do it every year is to kind of point out that is very flawed logic. I know a lot of people are just moving in and out of cards and, they're just flipping them for their 10% profit and moving on to the next thing. But if you're still of the belief of buy the player, hope he performs well and sell it for more, that is near impossible to pull off unless you are speccing on somebody. That is a different story. And typically the best time to do that is now, or even a couple of, within the last month. You should be buying downtrodden assets of players that you think could potentially have a situation change and could juice their prices. That's what Flipping Steve has done to perfection the last few years with guys. He made a ton of money off Sam Darnold this past season, and he sold before the season even started. And that's, rinse and repeat. I've been saying this for years. Any football card that I get myself into between now and the National, I don't want to own walking out of the National. Right now, I don't really own any football cards outside of PC, Jim Brown, and Myles Garrett stuff. But if I trade into or maneuver my way in or find a deal on something or find a player that's cheap that I want to get into, anything that I put money or assets into, my goal will be not to walk out of Chicago with that card later this year. That's just the way I view football. I think it is a mistake to hold pretty much any football into season except for project guys. Now, if you're buying a guy dirt cheap or very low and you're holding it in the season to see if performance matters, that's a different story. If you're buying players with high expectations already built in, I think that's where the mistake lies. Once again, let's flip this chart around. Outside of Jared Goff, you got decimated. 2018 guys, you did okay. You did okay. You could counter my argument with the 2018 guys. But even they were a little depressed coming into this season. Lamar had come off of not performing in the playoffs again. Who wanted Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold stuff? Those were two project guys. Baker Mayfield a little less so. He had a pretty good year last year as well. But Sam Darnold definitely was. And Saquon was basically a scrap heap play as well. Though a lot of people still thought he had a lot of juice left in the tank. So that's just kind of where we sit with modern football. Now, we'll see what happens over the next month or two as the playoffs move on and we kind of see how that plays itself out. And prices will swing based off that, absolutely. But for the regular season, this is what we're looking at. And it was messy. As always, curious for your thoughts and comments down below. We'll catch you boys and girls on the next one. Peace.